There's a lot of negativity and mean-spirited talk everywhere, yes? But instead of focusing on all that negative noise, let's shift our attention today to thoughts that refresh us with courage so that we can keep moving forward with the power of hope in our hearts and on our lips. Sound good? I'm Pastor Gary Ellis. I was encouraged this week by scriptures that speak of God's magnificent and magnified kindness. I want to share with you what I've been experiencing of His never-ending fountain of grace and mercy. That's right there deep within you, even if it may not feel like it right now. Maybe today will be like a gentle wind blowing some dying embers back into encouraging flames for you. Thank you for being a part of today's Sanctuary Online. If you're blessed, you can expand this message of hope to many others simply by hitting the like button. So thank you for doing that. In Psalm 118, we find this hope-filled phrase repeated twice. You'll recognize it. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, for His mercy endures forever. Now, that's found both in the opening verse of Psalm 118, verse 1, and in the closing verse, verse 29. The word translated mercy is what I want to focus on today. It's found close to 300 times throughout the Bible. It's a key theme. It relates to forgiveness or withholding punishment, which is how many most often, unfortunately, think of it. You know, mercy is not getting the punishment you deserve. Well, that's a part of it, but far more than that, the word mercy is defined and described as showing God's incredible, unquenchable power of kindness. So let me say that one more time. Mercy, the word that's defined, mercy, one of the really important, big overshadowing definitions or descriptions is God's incredible, unquenchable power of kindness. It's also faith-producing to be aware that mercy, as we are learning today, as God's magnificent, magnified kindness, is always very warm and personal. And to be more specific, the quality of His mercy, that is His magnificent, magnified kindness, is to you. Again, Psalm 118. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, for His mercy endures forever, for you and for me. Then, as we turn a few pages further on to Psalm 23, that psalm concludes with, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Now it becomes especially powerful when we realize the context of Psalm 23. You see, King David is fleeing from two people. Absalom, the son that he loved dearly and continued to love dearly, even in his trial, and his great friend, for whom David had very deep affection, the man who'd worshipped with him often in the temple. His son wanted David's throne, his father's throne, and David's great friend, both of them, turned on and betrayed David. They joined forces and were now pursuing David to overthrow his throne and to kill him, which was always the way it worked in those days. It's in that context that King David wrote, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. David's describing their threats as a smoky shadow rather than something that had the substance to actually do him any harm. Now that truth applies to us in our valleys as well. The threatening shadows of death depression, discouragement, and destruction in so many different forms don't have the power to carry out their threats. Let me say that again. All of the shadows in your life that would be related to some form of death, not necessarily just physical death, but emotional death, death-like experiences like depression and discouragement and hopelessness and destruction in so many different kinds and forms that you might experience, those shadows don't have the power to carry out their threats. Why? Because the God of magnificent, magnified kindness is always with us as a shield of incredible, indestructible favor. In David's words, of total certainty, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. You see, God is always our forward shield that makes the crooked places straight, yes? And our rear guard of grace and mercy, or magnified kindness. Goodness, well, that means he who prospers. This is developing the word that's translated goodness. It means he who prospers, who brings benefit, who brings joy, harmony, good things, and so many more. And then mercy, the deepest kind of ever-expanding kindness. You see, that is what follows us all of the days of our lives. And it passionately follows us. It doesn't just linger behind somewhere, catching up the rear, watching to see if you're messing up and deserve kindness. It's passionately pursuing us. That's what the tense of the word to follow all the days of my life means. At this moment, as I'm sharing this information, may the Spirit of God transform the information in your heart. Transform it from mere information of truth to the transformation of truth within you that shines out through you. You see, the important thing is this, that we need good information, but with brain power alone, we can't talk ourselves into the God kind of transformation or confidence, especially if we are in the throes of emotional shaking. The power of emotions always outweighs the power of logic alone. Think about this question in your own personal experience. Which has more of an influence over what you believe about something when you're saying, I just think, or I just feel? I just think, or I just feel. Isn't that what somebody will say, well, this is what you need to believe about this or that. And we say, well, okay, but I just feel. See, it's the power of the heart that takes the information it is fed and converts it to a feeling. It is the power of God's Spirit working in tandem with your soul that takes the information or truth and transforms it into inspiration that motivates further thoughts and actions that are positive in your life. Of course, it works in the negative too, the other way around. 30 years ago, I suffered for a time from clinically diagnosed panic attacks. The trauma of that was so deep. It's like an earthquake shaking from the center of your being. It's one thing, you say, to live through an earthquake that's external, that's going on around you, but that's frightening enough. It is quite another if that earthquake you feel on the inside of you. You can't get away from it. Now that's devastating. You can't run to a place of safety. You take that shaking with you. That's devastating. I learned good information about how to deal with them. But a major part of my freedom from panic attacks that I still enjoy today, 30 years later, came from the internal invisible power that was released by reading the Psalms. I'd feel the emotion, the panic attack beginning to rise up, and I'd open a psalm. I just knew that was the thing to do. Sometimes peace would be released really quickly. I'd only be even a few words. And sometimes I had to keep reading for a little longer. But let me tell you, it always worked. Now, here's something really important too. I didn't try to analyze any of the words. I didn't try to attach any doctrines to any of the words. I just read words. As deep within me there was a confidence that God would meet me there. I'm a teacher, but I didn't study read them. I just read until I experienced relief. It was contact with the inspiring power of God's Spirit that touched how I felt. It wasn't my ability to intelligently talk myself into peace. It wasn't that was my salvation each time. It was the release of God's power that came by His Spirit using His Word. You see, when we examine the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5, we discover that, first of all, they're all feelings oriented. Think about it. Love, joy, peace, patience. All of these words, kindness is another one. They are feelings motivated or based. The base definition of mercy is loving kindness, which sounds like the fruit of the Spirit, yes? His magnified kindness tells you that you can expect from the mercy power of God that is at work within you a release that brings that ever-increasing peace that calms the circumstantial storms and settles your heart and mind. Now, as we learn to experience His mercy or His magnificent, magnified kindness. And why do I call it magnified? Because it's always enlarging. You see, when something is of a spirit nature, spiritual nature, when you draw from it, it doesn't reduce, it expands. It's just the opposite of that which is natural. Remember that. When something is applied spiritually, drawing from the spiritual realm, does not reduce the quality, it expands the quality. While we live on the earth, we will continue to have encounters with frustrations. And that's my next point, is to talk about overcoming the frustrations. In fact, instead of major traumas, it's really daily frustrations or aggravations that are the real termites that weaken our peace and weaken our resolve, yes? In my experience, the following definition for frustration hits the heart of the matter. And realizing this helps greatly in overcoming frustration's little fox attacks. The power to overcome frustration is the inner activity and dawnings of God's Spirit. But knowing what frustrations normally are at the root is the good information part. So here's a definition of frustration. Frustration is the result of false or incomplete expectation. Frustration. That's the result of false or incomplete expectations. Too often, too many of our teachings on what it means to have true faith, honestly, they've been misguided. Instead of helping us grow, they've given us distorted pictures of what should be happening. You know, they should all over the place. What should be happening for us if God really cared and was really as close as we claim? We also have a 21st century mindset known as microwave expectations. We've been fashioned by our culture with a supposed need for speed as a virtue. A quote that I've always thought was just great, but as yet it runs counterculture, is the man runs fastest who runs on his knees. The man who runs the fastest runs on his knees. Knees, of course, being a symbol of prayer. Prayer being one element of what I'm going to call Christ-centered mindfulness. Christ-centered mindfulness. Now, you'll hear the term mindfulness a lot nowadays. It's an in vogue term. And truthfully, the principle of limiting yourself to or focusing on this moment is very healthy. That's mindfulness. We're not very much this moment people, are we? We tend to spend our time living in the past or the future, not in this moment. But it's in this moment where God is most richly experienced. Therefore, His magnified kindness, kind of mercy, most fully is appreciated as we learn to refashion our habits to include things, well, these suggestions. These are only a few of them. They're just tools. Being intentional about making time to be alone or in enjoyable, undistracted situations. Being intentional about that. Being on purpose about that. Being in situations where you're alone or to yourself that are enjoyable to you, but they're undistracted for even shorter times. Maybe you don't think you can carve out much time to do something like that. 5 minutes will work. I bet you can find 5 minutes. Moments to just take a few deep breaths and relax alone. Just sit quietly with yourself, and I suggest, and with Jesus. With your heart focused on Jesus. With your Christ heart activated. See, too many times when we say just be with Jesus, it triggers an automatic response to engage in something you've trained yourself to think is being spiritual. You know, those rules of what it looks like to be spiritual, the kind of things you do and think about. But no, just be, and be with Him as He is with you. See, that's one of the things I had to, it probably took the most effort to retrain myself in, because I had even taught on spiritual methodology of being with the Lord for so long that I had begun to believe it deeply. And it wasn't all wrong. It wasn't all bad. But it led to me thinking that that was the only way that Jesus was actually with me, until He began showing up when I wasn't focused on the spiritual things. During those times, allow yourself to simply be more deeply feeling the feelings that arise. If they seem negative, did you ever think it may be the power of His presence that is drawing them to the surface, those negative feelings, so that He can help you scoop them off, like silver refined in fire? If, quietly sitting there, just positive emotions arise, pay attention to them. Enjoy them, like the taste of a person chewing one of their favorite foods. And then again, here's something else. We also treat multitasking in our culture like it is a great virtue. It might be helpful at some times, but I do not believe multitasking is a great virtue. I don't believe it, because it works directly against mindfulness, or being in this moment, or being in this moment with Jesus. Begin training yourself to focus on what you are doing at that moment, one thing at a time. These are all practical helps I've just shared in overcoming frustration, and there, of course, are a lot more. But with them, confidence for life is strengthened as we determine that more fully understanding the character of God from the Scriptures is for us a master key in our mindfulness, a master key that helps everything else. Well, my friends, today's nugget was more fully understanding that mercy is God's character. And the part of mercy that we discovered is that it is magnificent, magnified kindness. God's character is magnificent, magnified kindness for and toward us. My friends, the light of truth is powerful. It overcomes a dark room with the flip of a switch. No struggle. Yes, light is powerful. Now, listen, the clarity, the sight of that room, this is your part. It depends on how many lamps of light that there are and that you've put in that room and which wattage of bulbs you are choosing to use, yes? Well, that's your part in a very specific way, naturally, physically, but that also has spiritual application. During the times of anxiety, frustrations, and fear, it's a very common thought. My whole life has been reduced to this threat or this problem or this situation, and I don't know how to solve it. But here's the important part of that. Those thoughts are not facts. There's shadows of death to frighten you, to disturb you, to make you anxious. Just remember, but God. That's right. But God, who is all wisdom, is keeping you in those moments, even if you don't feel it or see it at that moment. And my part of any solution will be quickened to me by His Spirit. So let me repeat that again. But God, this is the solution. A very powerful part of it. God, who is all wisdom, is keeping me, even when I don't feel it or when I don't see it at the moment. And my part of any solution will be quickened to me by His Spirit. Frankly, sometimes it is just having done all to stand therefore. If you need to do more, He will fully be able to. He is fully capable of guiding you, and you are fully capable and sensitive to responding. Don't let any lie dissuade you and distract you from that. 1 John 3:20. If our hearts condemn us, we know that God is greater than our hearts, and He knows everything. Until next time, this is Pastor Gary Ellis.